Alright guys, so here's the next video in the series, and today I'm going to focus, there's going to be some formulas that we're going to kind of review, and it's not so much I want you to remember these so you can kind of plug and chug numbers. I mean, that's not the point behind it, that's too easy. It's to know how to kind of manipulate the formula, to know if something goes up over here, how does that impact this side of the formula, because that's really where the questions I believe come from when it comes to this step. It's the concept behind the formula more so than just being able to plug in numbers. So we focus on that. You know, kind of the first order, zero order kinetics kind of stuff. So hope you liked the video.
All right, guys, so here goes our first question. It says, a new antibiotic is currently being studied to determine its pharmacokinetics. The drug was found to have a half-life of 1.5 hours and is limited by first-order kinetics. What is the minimum number of hours required to reach steady-state concentration of greater than 90%? Now, I've seen a lot of these questions, and I think, you know, it's the concept behind it is where they're really kind of asking you this. A couple little points, you know, obviously we talked about the half-life of a medication. It's just, you know, in that example, like when we went up here, it's highest concentration. To cut that in half, how much time did that take? And that's the drug's, half-life. If you have to know something about the first order kinetics, right? And that's just a general, kind of a general principle there. We have first order and zero order. Okay, we have first order, and this is just again a concept that you have to just be aware of. I don't really think you're gonna drill this home too much, but first order looks like this, and zero order is more that semi-straight line. So in a medication, when a medication is essentially first order kinetics, is that when it goes down, you know, it kind of goes down proportionally, okay? Proportionally, versus in a zero order kinetics, and this is the one, like they say, aspirin, alcohol gets metabolized, and then phenytoin. Those are your common ones, okay? That just kind of go down, and these go down like a constant amount, they say. It's a constant amount. You know, whether it's, say, I'm just throwing out random things, if it's 100 mLs, it's going to process 100 mLs here, whereas this is more, you know, more of that half-life kind of mentality where it'll just cut it in half. But anyways, that's the meaning between first-order kinetics and zero-order straight line. Okay, anyways, this is first-order kinetics. So, what is the minimum number of hours required to reach steady-state concentration? So let's get this out of the way because that doesn't really apply for the most part. So this goes back to that thing we talked about half-lives, right? If we started and said we're going to give somebody 100 milligrams, okay, and then remember a half-life is how much time it takes for that thing to go get half that dose. So then it goes down to 50, right? 50 milligrams. It went from 100 to 50 milligrams in one half-life. That's the first half-life, okay? So then you would give another 100 milligrams to 150, and then when that went down by half, you're left with how much? What's one half of 150? 75. So, or 75% of the original drug, okay? I know I was using milligrams just for simplicity, but think of this almost like percents. So 50%, 75% of the original, okay? And then, so that's your second half-life. So after two half-lives, you're left with should be it's kind of a 75%. And then if you went up by 175 and then cut that in half, what is that? That is 87.5. Increase that by 100 milligram dosing, and then cut that in half, and now you're at 93.75. So that was the first half-life here, 50%. Second half-life, 75. The third half-life. And then the fourth half-life here, and then you can go to the fifth half-life, and then it kind of reaches this plateauing almost effect, okay? And then once you get to between the fourth and fifth half-life, they call that steady state. So for these drugs, we want to get to that steady state because that's that therapeutic balance per se. So this one says, look, what is the minimum number of hours required to reach a steady-state concentration of greater than 90%? So you're like, well, wait a second. If I gave this drug, to get above 90%, I have to go, one half-life would only give me 50%. Two half-lives would only give me 75%. 3 half-lives only 87.5. But once I get to the fourth half-life, I'm at 93.75. So I got to at least get to the fourth half-life of this drug. Now, every drug's different, right? Some drugs, the ones that you take, just once a day might have a half-life that's really long, right? Because then you can wait to the next dose until day 2. But in this situation, this half-life is only 1.5 hours. You're like, wow, that's not very long. So it took me 1.5 hours to get to here. It took me 3 hours to get to here. It took me 4.5 to get to there. And to get to at least 93.75, it would take me 6 hours. And all I did was take, 1.5 hours. It took me to get to here, another additional 1.5 hours to here, another additional 1.5, another additional 1.5 to get to that point right there, which would be 6 hours. But if you understand that concept of how they're obtaining this steady state, this half-life, this bend, then I don't care if they change that number, because they could say required, and they could just play with you a little bit, required to reach a steady state concentration of at least 72%. Well, then you say, oh, I just got to get to my second half-life because that's 75, and you would have said 3 hours. Okay? But these are just the basic common ones. You can almost get them memorized in your head. 50, 75, 87.5, and 93. And after that, it starts getting real tight and stays around, around the same number. So these are the ones you got to know. So very common type of problem, but you got to know the half-life, of the medication you're dealing with and how far they were going to get it. Okay? Question number 2 says, a 55-year-old male with history of diabetes and allergies to cephalosporins develops an infection from ulceration. He is started on IV infusion of vancomycin at a dose of 1,000 milligrams every 12 hours. Vancomycin is eliminated by first-order kinetics. Good, right? Now remember, first-order kinetics, zero-order kinetics. And has a half-life of 6 hours. Okay, well, that's always important. Volume of distribution is 0.5 liters per kilogram. Assuming no loading dose, how long would it take for the drug to reach 94%? Okay, so it's essentially the same thing. They threw in a couple extra little things for you, right? But at the end of the day, if you could go quickly on this, you would go 100, boom, that's 75, boom, 87.5, 93.75, which is the, I'm sorry, it should be 50 here, I'm sorry. 50, 75. Yeah, what am I doing here? I'm messing my own self up. 75, 87.5, and then 93, yep. So again, to reach at least 94%, you're at the 1, 2, 3, you're at the fourth half-life. And how long is every half-life of this medication? It's 6 hours. So all you gotta do is go 4 half-lives times how many half-lives? How long did it take? 6 hours, and you get 24. All this other stuff is smoke and mirrors. It really means nothing on that. Okay, so always watch the distractors. But if you start seeing how long does it take to get a certain percent, think this curve. These are your basic numbers. Those are your half-lives. And then find out how much the drug's half-life is. Okay, so, some other little things in this section, aside from, again, this is first order, zero order kinetics. Again, first order is more proportional. You always get kind of half of it, half of it, half of it, whereas zero order is more a constant amount. And that's when you're going to do your aspirin, your phenytoin, and alcohol. Okay? As far as formulas and stuff like that for, you always worry about formulas, but here's how I want you to approach the formulas on this. I'm not so interested so much on the calculations because that gets, it gets really complicated in the sense of you got to worry about units. I want you to understand, I'm telling you this and it'll work. When you know certain formulas, okay, and this is like clearance of a drug, okay, clearance of a drug, and the CU, okay, that's the concentration of drug in the urine, okay. The VU, that is the rate, or they say volume, at which urine is produced, okay? And then the CP is the concentration of the drug in the plasma. You know how they always they tend to put that one on the bottom, of drug in plasma. And if you know all these little calculations, you can understand what the clearance of the drug is. Now, I don't think, honestly, it's not so much the idea that you have to know how to plug and chug numbers, and because that's just too easy. You know, if you just they put a number in the thing and then you plug it in. You have to understand the formula and how it impacts other pieces. For example, if I said if the clearance went down, how does that affect the concentration of the drug in the urine? You know, that's really where the questions come in is, do you understand the formula, number one? But what would happen if I took one of these and said, oh, well, if the clearance goes down, what happens to one of these other ones? And so all you'd have to do is find out what they're asking. So if I said, okay, the concentration of the drug in the plasma, what happens to this if my clearance goes down? If the amount of drug gets cleared goes down, how does that impact this? Because that's where the question's going to come. All you have to do is know how to move this guy all by himself, and just by basic math, to move him by himself, you just have to switch it, and now you're left with this formula. Okay, concentration of the drug in the plasma over concentration of drug in the urine times the rate volume which urine is produced over the clearance. So with this, you're like, well, wait a second. If the clearance goes down, and just by basic math, okay, if I had basic fractions, if the number on bottom gets smaller, the whole number here got bigger. Okay, so if the clearance goes down, that means the concentration of the drug in the plasma would go up. Okay, that's where I can see them asking a question more so than just having you plug in numbers and say, oh, the concentration is this. Okay, so you should be able to manipulate any of these formulas that you're going to learn. Okay, and here's just one: clearance is this, and say, well, if this goes up, how does that affect this? If this goes down, how does it affect this? Know how to work it like that, and it's just basic fractions, basic math. Okay, and we can make a video on how to do that if you need me to, but that's how I would attack formulas. Okay, is to know them, but know how to manipulate them like this. The other stuff that we need to know is another, obviously another formula for clearance is volume of distribution times that elimination constant, they call it. But again, this is just boring stuff because I honestly can't see them just making you do a number like that and plugging and chugging. It's more about this type of formula and then manipulating it. Okay. Some stuff I do want you to work on is going to be the two formulas I want you to know cold are loading dose and maintenance dose. You got to have those memorized, okay? And it's very real-world practical stuff here. So the loading dose, that's the dose required, to achieve a specific plasma concentration with a single dose, okay? And that's reliant upon, as they say, CP, which is the target, the target concentration of the drug in the plasma. That's what we're looking for. That's times volume of distribution. That's what we did in the last video, and over this fraction, over this constant. Now I'll say this: for all these formulas, when you see this, just think of it as one. Okay, and that's basically when a medication is IV. Okay, where it goes in and you don't lose it. So always think of it as one for all these purposes. And it just makes it simpler, and it'll work. The maintenance dose is the target concentration in the plasma times the clearance. Okay, well, boom, now we're back up kind of dealing with that guy. Clearance, and again, all over that constant. So again, we're going to think of him as 1. So really it's just, you're going to think of the formula like that and that. But the take-home point on this is that if I did a loading dose, is there anything in here that talks about kidneys or liver, or does that deal with any of this stuff? Has nothing to do with that and nothing to do with the volume distribution. So I don't care if someone's got kidney issues or liver issues. When I give that initial dose, if I want to get to a certain point, I don't care if they have all that stuff. I can still do it with the loading dose because it's not in the formula, meaning I can, again, if they got liver issues, I can still give them my loading dose based on this calculation, and it'll be okay. Now, to achieve a maintenance dose, it's the target concentration times the clearance. Now, we already know if you're going to try to clear something, you better, you got to have, concentration of which urine is produced So again, if you have bad kidneys, that's going to affect the clearance. So you have to take that in consideration when you're doing a maintenance dose, but neither kidney nor liver when you're doing a loading dose. And so basically, liver or kidney issues, we're going to say no problem when it comes to the loading dose. Okay? But you got to know those formulas. Know them cold. Write them down 100 times until you get them right. Okay? So you have to understand the basics of these two formulas and know how to manipulate that guy there. Now, with that being said, it says, let's try this question. To achieve a loading dose of a drug where the volume of distribution is 35 liters and the clearance rate is 65 mLs per minute and the desired dose is 2.5 milligrams per liter. Okay, a lot of numbers in there. What should be the initial dose administered? Okay, so again, they're telling us loading dose, boom, and you have it memorized. Loading dose, target concentration in the plasma, times the volume of distribution, all over that F, which is essentially 1, makes our life easy. Now, did they give us the target concentration? A desired dose is 2.5, good, okay. That was nice of them, milligrams per liter. Times volume distribution, again, very nice of them to give that. And all over 1, we don't, again, does anything have to do with the clearance? No, remember it's not part of the formula for loading dose. Now if they said maintenance dose, we'd have to fire that thing in there, but it's not. It's loading dose. Only this stuff. So then when you when you multiply this to 15, 16, 17, 01, 6, 7, 5, 7, 8, 87.5 or 88 milligrams, okay? That would be your loading dose. Make sure your units always cancel out, okay? All right? Again, if you don't know the formula, you're dead in the water. You gotta have that down, okay? And watch out for the smoke and mirror stuff. And this one says, it's the same, same question, but now here's the actual question to it, or here's the same, description. Before administration of the medication, the patient is found to have impaired liver metabolism as reports by elevated AST and ALT, the transaminases. What adjustments are necessary for this administration? So they're saying, okay, look, we're trying to give this loading dose. We got this data. We already know the dose, right? We already calculated 88 milligrams. But before they do it, they're saying, look, this guy's got some issues, guys. The labs just came back. What should you do? Should you decrease the dose by a half? Increase the dose by 1.5? Reduce the target dose by a half? Increase the target dose by 2? Or no necessary change? Now, if you've been listening on this, you would say what? You're saying, hey, Dr. Neal, it's a loading dose. We don't care about this guy, okay? If it was maintenance, maybe, but not when it comes to a loading dose, so there's no change. It's not part of the formula, okay? It's not part of the formula. If it was maintenance, you got to take in, kidney, all that kind of, anything that's going to affect the clearance of the drug, clearance or metabolism of the drug, okay? Know those formulas. All right. So, to kind of give a little hint for next time, I want to just touch on this. This is kind of like your study thing for next time, is we're going to be talking about these things, okay? And when you label these graphs, because you're going to see this, and literally on my step 1, I had a question that was just like this. It just went like that. And they asked me how to interpret that, okay? And it's real easy. Concentration, or they say the drug concentration dose, logarithmic, and then the response rate. So as you start giving the drug, then you get a certain response, and then we're going to learn that this, how high it is going to be the what? That's going to be the efficacy, and that's the max effect. Max effect of a drug, max effect, right there. Now, you have to interpret this, sometimes, inhibitors and all that stuff, and we'll get into that. But the difference between the two when it comes to the drug is the potency. And which one's more potent? Well, this one it took less of the drug. It only took this much of the drug to get this, versus here you had to give more of the drug to get to that same point. So that's what we're going to touch on. So just to go back and review, we talked about pharmacokinetics, what the body does to the drug. We talked about gut, liver, vein, heart, and so forth, where the oral goes in, where the IV, where the anesthetic. We know how to look at the graphs and interpret where exactly, the anesthetic versus the IV versus the oral, what they look like, right? And who's got the shortest Tmax and who's got the longest Tmax. We talked about the absorption types: passive, facilitated, active transport, and endocytosis. The first two are not ATP dependent. The second two are ATP dependent. We talked about distribution, what makes a drug be more, shall we say, has a low volume of distribution. It's a drug that's positively charged. It's a drug that's highly protein bound. It's one with a high molecular weight, and one that's not fat soluble. It's all those things make it a low volume distribution. What's considered low? Between 4 to 8 liters. How many liters are in the body? Roughly 42 liters. Okay. We talked about metabolism, and when you say, if you don't understand which of those P450s, you're going to default to the 2D6 just because it's pretty common. And that's kind of what we've seen. We didn't really touch too much on the phase 1, phase 2, but and I don't want to go too deep into that right now. I'll come up with a question first before we do it. And then we started talking about the excretion, and we have first order as well as zero order. And again, first order is going to be, they say it's consistently, kind of proportionally in my mind, and then zero order is the constant amount. We know the formula for clearance, and I said, look, you just got to know how to say, if this one goes up, how does that affect clearance, and vice versa. Know how to manipulate it with arrows going up and down, not so much how to plug and chug the numbers. And then we definitely talked about half-lives, 1 half-life, 2, 3, and 4, how that goes up in case they ask a question like that. So we'll kind of keep moving forward on this, and hope this was helpful, and we'll see you in the next video.